Good morning, good evening, whatever time you're listening, and welcome to another episode of the Practical People, Practical Effects podcast. And in this episode, I am very, very excited to be interviewing Rick Lazzarini of The Creature Shop in Simi Valley, California. Rick has worked on a lot of really amazing projects that I'm just very excited about. Number one being the person behind the animatronics and the Alien Queen and Aliens. He's also worked on Ghostbusters 2 and did those amazing witch puppets in Hocus Pocus. I bet a lot of you didn't know that the witches flying around for a lot of scenes were puppets, as well as my guilty pleasure of a Kurt Russell movie, Escape from L.A., and he also works on television series such as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and CSI. So, Rick, welcome to the show. Thank you for being on.
Hey, Christopher. Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
So, I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time. I'm just kind of riffing here, but I'm always curious about, what was little kid Rick Lazzarini like? When did you get the bug, and how did people respond to it?
I'll tell you. First of all, though, I need to make a correction. It's the company is the Character Shop.
Oh, what did I say?
You said Creature Shop.
Oh, see, I apologize.
That's okay. That's the Jim Henson organization, and it's they're a scrappy little competitor, and they're coming up in the world. But someday they might make it big.
It's funny. I know exactly why I did that too. I mean, part of it's always you feel so self-conscious doing the intro, but I was
yes.
just watching a whole thing. They have a bunch of puppet movies on Netflix that I discovered just hours ago, and they were advertising that on their Facebook page, and I got really excited and posted about it. So, all right, so I'm not going to edit that out. We're keeping it real here. So
okay, yeah. The way to to really make sure is we're the Character Shop, and we have a lot more character. Oh my gosh!
Take that, Jim Henson.
Anyway, your question was, when I was a kid, how did what was I like as a kid? How did I get into this?
Well, not just how did you get into this, but what's the mindset that kind of takes you in that direction? What kind of aptitude did you have as a kid? Were you building stuff at home, or you?
When I was a kid, I was a ham. So if anybody was doing any home movies, I had to be in them and photobomb it and push everybody else out of the shot. So I liked acting. I was in. I liked performing. I was in a school play, first grade, and I played Jesus in the school play. So I made my own prosthetics. I was 6 years old, and I made wounds out of binder paper and crayon, and Scotch taped them on my hands and my feet. And they told me to take them off because that was too graphic. and so there you go. There's my performance. There's my makeup skills. There's my creative differences, all starting very early in my career.
And you didn't sue Mel Gibson for Passion of the Christ. Why?
And so I was always making stuff, sculpting things, making things, constructing things when I was a kid. And I was super into monster movies, horror films, genre films. On to when I was in 8th grade and there was a chance to go out with like the hottest girl, go on a date with her. And we had set it up for a Friday, and then I found out in TV Guide, King Kong was on Channel 5, so that the date's not going to happen, babe. I have never seen this before, so that's the kind of kid I was.
Wow.
What else? And I was so into apes. I was so into chimps and gorillas. I wanted a chimpanzee when I was a kid, so bad. That would be this is an awesome companion. My parents wouldn't let me have a chimp as a pet, which is, that's pretty abusive, I think, to not let not let you have a pet that is 7 times stronger than a human and that can bite your face off.
And fling poop.
Yeah, and fling poop. But then I went to see Planet of the Apes when I was 8 years old, and that was like, oh my God! And then they started to show how they did that stuff. They would be, kind of like little blips and trailers of the behind the scenes. There'd be little articles, and I ate that stuff up, just ate it up. So that got me set on a path to how do you make these illusions? How do you pull these off?
See, that's what doomed me. And, you and a bunch of other people that were in front of the cameras while you were making your movie history, same deal. I was sitting at home, and this is the time when the VHS recorder was a thing. So I was always, there's a special going to be on. I got to pop the tape in and record it so I can watch it endlessly. Yeah. So, so it sounds like it's a pretty similar story. I get the ham part. There certainly seems to be a lot of ham in special effects. I've noticed. That seems to be a reoccurring theme, which is funny because you guys are the ones behind the cameras for the most part, or underneath the cameras, or behind the thing that the camera is shooting. So
right, we're frustrated actors. We might not be good looking enough to be right in front of the camera, but so we channel all of that energy into performing with our puppets, with our creations. And so we consider ourselves performers. We're in the Screen Actors Guild. We get paid as principal performers, and we want to bring that character to life in the most realistic way as we can.
Now, that's an interesting thing that you you bring up, and I do want to come back to the chimps and the monkeys soon. But was it Stan Winston that kind of started insisting that you guys get paid as principal performers? Am I getting that wrong? I feel like there was kind of like an incident where effects artists were not getting the credit that they deserved, and I feel like it was Stan that kind of stood up and went, no, this has got to change. Or am I remembering that wrong?
I don't know. I know that on Aliens he was not like that. We all were puppeteering and performing, and I actually was the only one on the British Screen Actors Guild on a waiver. And then they realized that I would be due residuals for that, and so they said, "Tell them you're not acting." That came from production side.
Oh wow! Okay.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, Gail. Anyway, so not then, perhaps after. I know that he did really step into. We are creating characters, and this is what's needed to bring them to life. And so, sure enough, by the time Jurassic Park rolled around, those guys were principal performers. It's a battle against the studios. They don't want to pay puppeteers to be principal performers, and I don't know why, because it's no more money from them when they do have to pay residuals. Residuals for performers are in one big pot, and all the performers have to share from that pot.
Might be some other performers that have a hand in that. That's why performers become producers too.
Yeah, maybe, huh? And that's why if you have My Dinner with Andre and it's just you and one other person and it becomes a huge hit, two people share in the pool. If you are working on Ghostbusters 2016 and there's 18,000 people in there, everybody's sharing that pot.
Yeah.
But I think Stan later on, he did champion that. As a shop owner, you are always stuck between a rock and a hard place on that. You want to get as many of your performers SAG contracts as possible. The studio, wants to spend as little money as possible and fights back against that. And there are certain studios that fight back harder than others.
Well, it's interesting. I was having a conversation not too long ago with somebody in the comic book industry, and they were kind of lamenting how so many people in the comic book industry think that they're going to turn their comic book into like a Netflix property or something like that. But they end up after, 3 years of hard work, And after everyone's paid and their agent gets their cut and all that sort of thing, it's like they're getting like $30,000 for like 3 years work, and their Netflix deal goes nowhere or nobody sees it, and yet they're all happy. And he's going like, why are you doing that? And I said to him, I said, it's funny, even as an independent filmmaker myself, it's funny to watch, without dropping any names or even positions, people will go out of their way to spend money that they don't need to elsewhere just to avoid giving it to you.
Yes.
And I'm
absolutely.
Like, why? That's so perplexing. And, with the visual effects industry, they don't have a union at the moment. And so I actually see there's, like these kind of auteur directors, like I'm blocking on his name, but he did Annabelle Creation and Lights Out. I really like, he has his own YouTube channel. I really enjoy listening to him talk about his filmmaking, but he'll step in and he'll do his own visual effects.
Wow.
And he doesn't have to worry about the visual effects side of it, throwing a fit because they don't have a union.
Yes.
Where you guys do, right? It's all.
Well, there's so many unions in Hollywood. Screen Actors Guild is the union that that I'm in, and that's for actors and performers. But there are other unions such as 44, which is special effects and props. There's a costumers union. There's a makeup union. There's a sculptors and mold makers union.
Wow.
There's the Teamsters, and I think at one point I was a member of like 4 different unions, and I kind of slowly let those ones drop that weren't where I wasn't really making a living from them. So I didn't want to be paying dues to them.
Yeah, you could easily end up in a trunk and be yelling out like, "Which union do I owe?"
Exactly. And then it depends on what show you're on. What union is it? What union are they signatory to? Because someone says, "Oh, it's a union show," but they just mean it's the craft unions are there and not SAG, or it's SAG and not the craft unions. So you have to be very particular about it.
Yeah, I mean, you piss off the craft union and like no food that day. Sorry. There's a lot of bad jokes here, You had to know that the fact that I know Alec, that came with bad jokes. So
yes.
So I want to go back to the whole kind of simian aspect of our conversation, because you mentioned Planet of the Apes, and this is kind of, I don't know if this actually has anything to do with practical effects, but I just loved the spirit of it. And you kind of noticed was David Lynch just dropped What Did Jack Do on Netflix. Speaking of
we've been enjoying that.
Netflix again. I've watched it twice, and the funny thing is that Planet of the Apes has come up because of that, because I was, my wife was sitting on the couch, and I sit down. It's the end of the evening. I'm like, this is 17 minutes short. We got to watch it, And I turn it on, and the monkey starts talking. There might be spoilers for this, by the way. If anyone hasn't watched it, go watch it. So,
right.
But the monkey starts talking, and she instantly goes, I can't handle this. I'm like, what? It's, she's like, I can't. She's like, ever since, it's like my parents loved Planet of the Apes and watched it constantly, and I've never, like, it's always unsettled me. I don't like apes. I don't like Sibi. Like, she's the opposite.
Wow.
And she doesn't, I'm watching like, the Aliens movies going like, it'll be great one day when we have, human-like robots that will just do our laundry and dishes for us. And then we can, and she's like, no, we're not getting one. I was like, well.
She's anti-ape, huh?
She's anti-ape and anti-android. So she's unsettled by both. So we've been talking about Planet of the Apes and all of that lately. Now, I gotta say, though, I mean, I loved the spirit of What Did Jack Do, and I love David Lynch, and the fascinating thing about that was David Lynch had no pretense. Like, he obviously built that set in his garage.
Exactly.
And he got a monkey person, and he got an effects person to just like track his mouth in. I assume that's him doing the voice for the monkey as well.
That's what I thought too. Yes.
Very
clutch cargo-y.
Yeah, exactly. And he like I said, there's no pretense there at all. And it's like I was like, did he write this script using?
He wrote it, and write it, or did a million cliches write it?
Well, I was going to say it's like he took Mad Libs and Scrabble and maybe a Ouija board and then threw it together and still managed to make the whole thing really entertaining. And
yes.
And that was I loved that. And as someone who I've built sets in my own garage and done my own effects, and I'm actually currently working on something where I do all the characters because I just can't afford to pay the craft union to cater and actors and
right.
So there's someone losing their mind going, that's not what the craft union is. But I love the idea of the spirit of that. And then you said something that I thought was kind of funny. You said, was it like, it's genius. He essentially just made like a movie that could be cut up into memes and you can just watch the whole thing in memes.
Exactly. All of those little, you could just drop, when I used to, do radio, we do drop-ins, just these out of context, little clips, audio clips. And now that we have, memes, we can do that with video,
mm-hmm.
of course. And so, yeah, every one of those takes, with the monkey, you can turn into a little, and it would somehow respond to whatever somebody says online.
Yeah.
And, was that his intent in the first place? But, it's just, I grew up with that guy, watching Eraserhead.
Oh, yeah.
And all of his other work, and to see him just go back to that bare bones black and white style, and his hair is all white, but it's fabulous. He's got so much of it.
I'm envious, yeah.
and his voice is so unique and awesome.
I do a David Lynch impersonation, and so.
Okay.
I don't know what to say. Like, I see, it's kind of my hobby. I love doing impersonations. So when I figured out I could do David Lynch, I'm like, what do you make David Lynch say to be funny? Because if you're trying to be funny, you're just going to end up saying things that David Lynch might say anyway,
Right, yeah.
You've been seen with chickens.
There's that echoey quality there. That's pretty good.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, he's got a cadence to him. So go ahead.
What was the name of the chicken? Tatu Taban?
Oh, I forgot. I'm gonna have to watch it again. I'm not
Taban or something.
Yeah.
It's like, where the hell did that name come from?
I Scrabble at the Ouija board. I don't know. It's But anyway, I mean, do you personally, before we get into some of them, there is some movie stuff I want to ask you about.
Sure.
But do you have any like personal projects, or have you helped out in any personal projects of friends that are like that you had fun doing or that you can talk about?
You've had Alec Guinness on the show, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And Alec and I go way back, and he has made some short films in his time, so I've been involved in a couple of those projects, usually as an actor. He just likes, watching me make a fool out of myself on screen. And it's easier going. Well, I say it's easier going into acting than being responsible for a set or a model or something like that. But I say it's easy. And then one time I was supposed to do all this dance choreography, and I'm all out of shape, and I can't remember what comes after the three or the two. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What was the thing after two?
We'll fix it in editing.
Yes. So yeah, I kind of like doing that, as long as I don't have to get too committed, spend too much of my time on it, because I've got my own personal projects such as lazing around.
That's a good one. I've been I can be deeply involved in that project for too long.
Yeah.
Before I have to go like, maybe I should just move on to other projects. But but so you've had your shop for was it you let's go back a little bit again. So
Sure.
you were this kid that was a ham and doing all of these fun things, and then did you kind of just jump right into working for Stan, or were you kind of jumping around shops like Alec was for a while?
Yeah, jumping around at shops. Pretty much all of us worked at makeup effects labs at some point. So that's probably the oldest ongoing shop that I can think of. With Alan Apone and Doug White. A couple other guys, Frank Carasosa, Peter Knowlton, that was the other partner then. I worked there, gigged there, working on, things like Evil Speak and Slumber Party Massacre. There you go. That was Larry Carr and myself kind of keyed that show.
That one still endures. There's still people talking about that movie to this day.
Yeah, a feminist director, who gave the gals girl power, and so they had their, the driller killer guy had his comeuppance, thanks to the gals. So a lot of gore effects, but I have some fun stories from that one.
Oh yeah, anything you want to tell. We're not trying to steer this ship in any direction. We're just seeing where the winds take us.
Okay, fun. One thing was the machete. This one gal had a machete. She's supposed to chop off his hand. The guy, he's running around with his drill, and so we make a gelatin hand at the shop. And we paint it and set it up, and so we have made it out of gelatin so that you can chop it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, nobody tested this formulation. Possibly it was me, but not necessarily. Might have been somebody else. Might have been someone senior on the staff. I'm not going to name any names. Anyway, so we have this cool-looking thing, and so the guy's supposed to stand nearby, and we get this real machete, make it really sharp, and it's supposed to be sliced through in one slice. And so, first of all, they say, no, get a grip to do this. Get a grip to do this. So a grip comes in, and he's like, I'm getting ready to do it. And he goes, no, I'm not going to do it. And then I go, all right, let me do it. So we get this thing, and here's this gelatin hand we're supposed to cut off in one whack. And I, roll in action, and I bring down that machete as hard as I can, and it literally bounces off. Bounces off this gelatin. The gelatin's so damn dense that the machete barely made a nick in it, and I was so panicked that I started hacking away at it. Right? Like, and they're going, you messed it up, and it's supposed to be just one slice. I said, well, this is never going to go in one slice. And luckily, they edited it to look like the gal was hacking and the guy was, reacting. And it was a beautiful shot, baby.
Happy accidents.
Happy accident. The other, also machete related, was the guy was supposed to fall on this machete. So I had made like 3 balsa wood machetes and gave him like a leather underpiece to wear, right? And this I had tested at the shop.
Wait, the machete or the guy?
The machete.
Oh, okay.
And the leather thing. Like I wore the leather thing, and I threw myself on my sword. I mean my balsa machete, and it worked great. So I had a balsa machete, 3 of them, and then in this thing. And so I brought it on the set, and they said, "Well, how do we know it's going to work?" I said, "Well, I tested on the shop." "Well, show us here." "Okay, well, we have 3 of them. Show us." Okay, so I showed them the one. And it worked great. And they said, how do we know the second one's going to work? I go, because it worked in the shop. You saw that one go, so you... No, let's see that one work. Okay, and the second one where I said, you now have 1 balsa machete to shoot with. How do we know that's going to... Oh, my God, people. So those are some fun memories of Slumber Party Massacre.
It's funny because it was Steve Johnson talks about wanting to do a show about special effects artists in that era, and I'm going, what would that be like? And now talking to you, I realize it'd be like Spinal Tap.
It would be. it would be. We were just a bunch of kids.
I mean, that,
pinching ourselves, not even believing how lucky we were and how cool it was. Just to be set off to do stuff, to do cool stuff.
Well, this is the thing that, really amazes me, because I dreamed about doing this stuff for a long time, and for various reasons I was, again and again talked out of it. But, now I'm in my early 40s and I'm finally doing stuff, and I'm having a good time with it, but I'm still not the skill level that you guys were even in your early 20s. And it's just amazing to me, that in my early 20s, I was like getting up to all sorts of crazy stuff, but I definitely didn't have the discipline that you guys had to craft some just amazing stuff. I mean, and you guys really have to, the special effects artist is a really broad term for anybody that doesn't know. I mean, you have to understand animatronics, you have to understand sculpting, prop making, painting, makeup. I mean, you guys really did do it all. Whatever you were called on, you had to make it work, and you had to make it look beautiful.
Exactly. And what was great was all of this cross-pollination, because you would work with somebody you had heard of, that you'd read about in Fangoria or Cinefantastique, and get to know that person and find out, oh man, they're pretty down to earth, or man, that guy's a jerk. But their techniques, they came from a shop where they did it a certain way, and then you meet up with them and they show you this, and you go, oh, I do this thing this way, and you learn so much from all of that crazy, like I said, cross-pollination, freelancers, really talented folks coming from different places, coming together, trying to figure out how to make something work.
Yeah, I've got to say that's the coolest part of it for me. Especially the thing that blows me away is that I've actually, one person I interviewed on this show is designer Neville Page, who he was a judge on Face Off, and he's done work for Ridley Scott and for Star Trek and all these great projects. And I had interviewed him, and we stayed in touch, and he was following my Instagram. And suddenly he's sending me all of these photos of this miniature he's building, and he says, this is because of the miniatures you've been posting. And he started like quizzing me about my miniatures, and I'm going like, doesn't Neville have, I don't think he's got an Oscar, but I think he's got Emmys. I'm like, here's this Emmy award-winning guy, and he's suddenly telling me, hey, I'm doing this, and it's all because of you. You gave me the bug, and I want to ask you how you did it. And, for me, I mean, I was kind of like, sir, are you lost? Okay, are you sure you have the right guy? Because, I'm just
if he asks you for, how did you do this thing? It's like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Man, I'm talking to this prize-winning effects artist.
Yeah, and it's like, and what I come to realize is it's just like you said, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it or what position you have in the industry. If you've got the excitement for it, it's just kind of like, it's just a bunch of kids getting together, and no matter how old you are, and going like, look what this person did. Isn't this cool? Like, how did you do that? Oh, I'm going to try and do that. I want to go home and do that. Exactly. That never gets old. And that's really what I admire and respect mostly about, I got to work for Alec a couple of years back, and that was the real pleasure with Alec was more than anything. It's like, he's still got that bug. Both him and Tom still have that bug. And, when I talk to Shannon Shea or, talking to you, it's like, or was it Greg Nicotero? There was that documentary on KMB where he said it's like a sickness. Like it's not that it's like you can't do anything else. Like and there's an excitement to that, but it can also be especially these days it's with CGI being what it is, and I know that the shops have to work a lot harder.
Sure.
But you were mentioning to me before we started recording, you've got You're still doing stuff. You're doing a lot of commercial work. You said you've got a couple of Super Bowl spots coming up, and you've been doing the Janine Ghostbusters. Was it TurboTax?
QuickBooks. Yeah.
QuickBooks. Yeah. That's it. The QuickBooks commercials. So you've been doing Slimer for those. You do a lot of commercial work these days.
I do, and I have been for a long time. I would get involved in creating characters for these kind of long-running campaigns, and then just start to do maybe 1 or 2 films a year, and not be as involved in the long slog of a big film. Because after Mimic, where I had 70 people.
Oh wow!
Or Snakes on a Plane, where it was just an insane build and not the greatest experience. I was like, do I really want that kind of responsibility and that pressure? It's not so fun, also, it kind of tweaks with my attention span. I like to do a lot of different things, and so commercials lets you do that, and lets you accomplish in a year, 20 different things. And here's the deal. And you mentioned CG. Both of these things that I did recently. There's a Super Bowl spot. It'll be on the Super Bowl. It's for Reese's Take 5 candy bar. They shot. We shot less than a month ago. When did we shoot, Deb? The 11th. The 11th we shot these things, shot them across 2 days, and they're already online and done. And the reason that we got them was because they needed a bunch of effects, and they didn't have time for CG.
Ah.
Right? And that's where I love CG. You take too long, CG. Probably they would have normally bypassed us, but they didn't have the time to do it because here comes Super Bowl coming up. And so we did these baby typing hands, and the baby pops a bottle out of his mouth. That's all practical. It's married with a little bit of CG wizardry, thanks to the mill. There is a guy's head that pops open, and a little alien appears. And so we did that, a head popping open, and then built the alien, and there again, a little bit of CG tied it together. We have a guy with his head up his bum, and that was puppeteered. And then CG erased the rods and me. Great, that's where I like CG. Get rid of me, not my stuff. How's that?
Yeah, right.
And for the Slimer thing, I had created this Slimer just as a movement reference for Ghostbusters 2016. I knew that they were just going to replace it with CG, but I tried to make it as good as I could, given the little time and money they gave me. And so it's paid off, because when they said, "Hey, can you make a Slimer?" I said, "I've already made a Slimer." And so we used it for like 4 different ads. And it's got Janine there.
Was it on set, or did you guys just?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you had it on set.
She's a doll in real life. Very professional, very nice. Has held up very well. They made this cool replica of the Ghostbusters bottom floor, which is a fire station in Los Angeles. The interior is so they duplicated that, so I got to be on set, and then once again the mill put a little translucent haze on me and a little glow on me, and erased the rest of my body. So those are 2 ads that are playing right now. There's another one on the Super Bowl that I can't say what it's going to be for, except it's a show. It's a contest show involving music. That's all I can say.
Oh, okay. I think I actually might know the one, but I won't say because I don't want to get you in trouble. So
right, I haven't seen that they've released it yet. So
yeah, I think I've seen commercials for it, and I think I understand the yeah. Well,
Okay.
I won't. I was gonna make a joke, but that ain't. No, just it.
Right. That might lead us. That might lead to the lawyers coming and saying I broke my NDA.
Yep. I'm just gonna shut it down right now. But that is very cool, because one of the things I'm first and foremost, I'm a filmmaker. I don't have the skill, I believe, to be a full-time special effects artist for movies. But what I can do, where my skills are, I feel like I do very well at those things, and I love to direct, and I love to fund my own projects. But one of the things that always fascinated me was Ridley Scott has managed to finance so much of his own, personal projects, because he has a commercial production house that is, done really well over the years. So and I really, like you said, I love the idea of just being able to move from project to project and not linger on it for a year where you burn out and you can't wait for it to be done. Like, you're really excited to begin with, and by the time it's done, you're just like, I just want it done.
Yes, I want it to be over. Yeah.
And the other thing, like I said, I'm excited to know that CG takes too long for some of the commercial people. And the other great thing about it too is that you get to, it's almost like commercials still have a need for variation in style that CGI itself just doesn't bring to the table. Like, with a lot of movies, like you see the new Star Wars movie, and they did a wonderful job with the CGI. But it's like you can't move backwards into like the old Lucas Arts stuff from the original trilogy, where you'd look and go like, oh, cool, that was a model, or look at that meteor or something like that. But you do see commercials where people are still using stop motion. They're using all sorts of stylized stuff. They're not always shooting for realism. A matter of fact, they're going the opposite direction, trying to make it as whimsical or different as possible. So was it Fonco Studios in Los Angeles? They do a lot of commercial work, like little sets and miniatures. I love working with miniatures. And so it seems like, there's still a playground for what we do in commercial work. It's very exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also in features too, with the Netflix and all of these streaming places, they need content. And so that's another avenue that for us has created more work. And most of it's kind of standard approach stuff. But yeah, definitely commercials. They always want to be very fresh and creative. Even if they're pulling up stuff from 20 years ago, it's relatively fresh and creative. People haven't seen it lately. So I do like that variety.
Yeah, it is exciting to me. And I mean, honestly, I still like to see it in movies, and I'm not 100% convinced that audiences don't like seeing that stuff in movies, because I work at a movie theater part-time in the evenings to supplement my income, and I see people coming out of the movies, and I talk to them, and it's like, if they see a movie that has great CGI but not a good story, the CGI is not saving it for them.
No, it's not.
The only time I think a good story or a bad story gets saved is, they'll come out and go, the movie wasn't that good, but the actors or some other aspect within the movie kind of entertained them enough that it made them get through the movie. And sometimes that can, I mean, performances are, I think, the number one thing, but, sometimes, like I said, people still, we do like special screenings of older movies, and people show up for those because they still want what those older movies offered. And it's not like they couldn't, just rent it. It's like they wanted the experience of going and seeing that on the screen again. So, there's I'm sure there's more that could be debated about that. But, the biggest example that you worked on, which is, again, one of my absolute favorite things that I've ever seen, is, in this house, Hocus Pocus is big. Mm-hmm. When it's Halloween time, Hocus Pocus is played by my 8-year-old at least 25 out of the
oh man,
days out of October. You know,
turned into a classic.
it has, and my wife really loves that movie. She went to high school with someone who had like one shot in there, so it's always like Spot Bobby.
Right.
But one of the things that I just love so much is that you built the Sanderson sisters as puppets on broomsticks.
Yeah.
And I just want to know about, what were those puppets like? Did you actually puppeteer them, or did you do the builds and hand them off, or did you do the whole thing?
I rarely, if ever, hand off something. It's got me in it, and it's got to have me, in it all the way. Shepherding it, designing it, building it, creating it, and then bringing it to life on set. I puppeteered on those. They were really just exquisite, really nice. We sculpted likeness puppets of the three women, and what's funny is we wanted to make them extremely accurate, so we sent out a sheet saying, here's the measurements that we need. And Kathy and Bet, sent their things back, and Sarah Jessica Parker's, why do they need all these measurements? like, are they pervs? I don't know. Would you like me to get it correct, accurate? We got our measurements, and I've been selling them online for a long time. And so we need that kind of stuff, and we need pictures of them, front and profile, and to get them as accurate as possible. And I had a very good sculptor working on them, but there was something they were accurate, but not feminine. There's a little bit too hard of an edge to them, and I thought, okay, I think I need something different here. And then I hired the sculptor Michelle Millet, who just took them over and turned them into miniature women.
I was gonna say, because there was the first time I saw the shot, it said these puppets, and I had to like do a double take and go, oh my god, those aren't the actresses.
Yeah. So attention to detail, a feel for the form, a feel for the luminance, as far as the paint job is concerned, super attention to detail in the making the replication of the costumes. They had custom woven, custom knit aspects to their outfits, and so we had to miniaturize all of that stuff, and we had to, scale down the weight of the capes,
Oh wow.
And dye them the exact color. So I still got Sarah Jessica in my office on display. They were foam latex puppets, with very real silk and custom painted and dyed wardrobe. They had mechanical armatures inside that were all passive. And I basically kind of stole a technique that I had seen used in the Star Wars trilogy. They had like a land speeder, and so basically they had a rod going to the front of the land speeder and a rod coming out the top of the guy's head. And so once you put that on a ball joint, they could bank the land speeder and turn his head and raise his body and lower it.
Right. Yeah.
And I saw that, I went, oh, that's what I want. And so we used the same technique for these witches. So, we could get them to like a dive bomb and hug close to their broomstick, or, kind of pull up and pull back like they're putting on the brakes. And so we're pretty proud of that, and pretty proud that it turned out to be something that's so beloved and so,
Again, well, it's like I watch for the shots, and it's actually very difficult to tell, unless it's the actress is actually, gesticulating and speaking a line. Right. It's pretty hard to tell which shots are them and which shots are the miniatures. Okay. And were you puppeteering them against miniature sets, or were you doing blue screen, or a combination?
I think it was always against. it was either against a green screen or a blue screen, depending on which was wearing what colors.
Yeah, because that definitely makes a difference when you're putting them against a screen. And here's something that's very interesting to me. You said you had to scale down the weight of the capes, so you're actually kind of having to do some physics work as well, because air resistance and gravity are going to, of course, affect smaller capes. So you have to make them heavier, or
have to make them lighter, and you have to find a lighter weave fabric. Because if anybody's ever made puppet or doll clothes, that are tiny, you go, oh man, this just doesn't fold or crease or wrinkle the way the full scale fabric does. And then sometimes you have to use a weaker, thinner woven fabric for items. Especially when you want it to waft in the wind realistically. Yeah, no,
I mean, it really paid off because it was very hard to tell. And I just love hearing about stuff like this, because there was another, I think it was a Corridor Crew. They do that Visual Effects Artist Reacts video series, which I plan on ripping off. I mean, being inspired by in 2020 with Practical Effects Artists React. So I might harangue you later on.
Right.
To see if I can get a few practical effects artists like yourself in to do something similar. But they were talking about was it not Terminator Genesis, the one with Christian Bale? I forget what it was called. Salvation, maybe? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Anyway, there was a giant satellite dish array that got blown up in the opening of the film. And it was a miniature, and they talked about how not only did they film it at a certain speed, but they actually had to time the different explosions and almost so that the weight, they had to calculate what the weight would be of something that size and simulate the time it would take each piece to fall to the ground. In addition to changing their film speed. It was just amazing, all the different things they had to think about to sell this miniature as a full-size effect. And sitting there in the theater, just watching the opening of the movie. And I fortunately, I'm one of these people, I can watch a movie without trying to analyze each effect the first time around. I can get involved in the story, but it just
exactly.
I completely accepted that was just a full-size satellite dish exploding, and it did look great. It didn't look like CGI simulations or anything like that. So I just get so excited about that stuff. Trying to get it right.
Yeah, I love precision model work. I just get giddy with that.
Is that your favorite? Is your favorite working with miniatures and puppets and that sort of thing?
In terms of miniatures, it's something that I very rarely do, but it's something that I truly appreciate. In terms of, I know what they're doing with the scale. I know that what they're doing with the geometry and what they're doing with the paint, and then the tricks that they use to fool the eye. I'm just super impressed by that. And I know this is funny. I worked on Aliens, and we were pretty impressed by the miniature power loader.
Oh yeah.
We built a miniature Queen, but the miniature power loader was like, oh, look at this toy. And Jim Belahovic did a lot of the work on that. Later on, when we got to your guilty pleasure, Escape from L.A.
I was gonna segue into that, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah. I got Jim Belahovic to make the hang gliders, and you just hug yourself. He put details in I didn't think were there, that I wouldn't have thought of, and made him, the way that the fabric pooched and the guy lines, and it was just everything was perfect. so I was glad to have gotten a master like Bella Hovick in to help me make that part while we concentrated on the puppets.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because you guys did like a miniature Kurt Russell and a miniature Pam Grier, right?
Yeah, and Steve
Buscemi.
Oh man, why am I?
Steve Buscemi, was it?
Buscemi, thank you. Sorry, getting old. Yeah, we made miniature versions of them. Once again, doing very realistic sculptures, very realistic costume manufacture, and then you go and sit in Kurt Russell's dressing room, BSing with him and getting measurements and talking about the thing with him, and who gets to do that? And Pam Grier, oh my God, so beautiful. And she was so sweet, so nice, personable, down to earth. Not every performer is like that.
Oh, no, I know it, but
right. Steve Buscemi, wonderful guy, nice guy. Are you guys through yet? And so same kind of a thing. We made foam latex puppets with passive armatures inside, and flew them pretty much the way we did on Hocus Pocus. For a while, we were the miniature flying puppet people.
Yeah, some of my favorite stuff is puppets. I guess it's because I make my own projects and it's very low budget, so
yeah.
I just automatically assume I'm not going to have a full size creature build on my show. It's going to be a puppet, which is essentially, and all the things all my materials are like styrofoam sheets and cardboard for my sets, and most of my puppets I'm not a very good sculptor at all. So a lot of my puppets are packing tape sculptures that, I just put pieces over, and, I have a lot of fun with those. And then I just make sure that I do the post-production too. So I just make sure that the lighting shows just enough to be convincing, and not break the illusion. So I really, after all this,
I've seen some of the clips of your stuff. They're very, very atmospheric.
Oh, thank you.
Some of your tests. Yeah.
Yeah, well, what I'm working on right now is for a movie called Brimstone Saint, and it's actually, the movie's done. I didn't do any of the visual effects for that, but I was asked, the director of that saw my work for a Ray Bradbury project with the actor Bill Oberst Jr., and he loved the whimsy of what I had done there. So he said he wanted something that looked like, not quite realistic, kind of whimsical, and and that's really, I've kind of had to steep myself in being stylized in favor of, if somebody came to me and asked me to do something ultra realistic, depending on what it was, I might be able to do it, but there are certain things that I know, I've kind of got to fall back on the crutch of just being stylistic, which is, okay, it's how you have a style. But
making it realistic ups the ante, makes it more difficult.
Yeah, and sometimes it makes it more stressful too, especially
absolutely.
If they've already put a deposit down, you're like, oh crap,
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
Yeah, that's why when we do animals and creatures, a lot of times, especially if they're supposed to be doing anthropomorphic type of actions, I try to bring human-like qualities into them. And that way I can make them more whimsical, because you're so familiar with what real animals look like. It's just that much harder if you were to do a graph, and look at the time versus realism. All of a sudden you have a steep upward curve. The more realistic you're supposed to try to achieve it. And then you've got the uncanny valley that you're fighting.
Yeah.
Where people go, no, I don't buy it. I know what a cat looks like. That doesn't look like any cat I've seen, because you didn't nail this and you didn't nail that. But if I make it a whimsical or a stylized cat, right, all of a sudden this is a new thing. There's nothing to judge it by. It's got realistic aspects to it. And so, yeah, give me stylization any day.
Well, it's, you bring up a really good point, and I there's a couple of aspects or points that I can think of where I think realism didn't pay off. The latest is the Lion King CG remake, where essentially they came up with these very well rendered animals an insane amount of data. It took I think render farms around the world were working 24 hours a day to get that movie rendered out. And yet what a lot of people noticed right off the bat was, hey, we had this wonderful animated cartoon with all this expression, hand drawn, all this kind of soul. And it's like these animals they're reenacting all the scenes, but with none of the emoting, because they had to keep them in the realm of what
real world.
Yeah, what real animals would look like. And it's just not as much fun. Same goes for the Aladdin remake. And then one of the things that I pointed out with Shannon Shea, which was and it's kind of a it's like I think I just caught him off guard because it's kind of a more controversial thing, but the we'll say the adult service robots that are being made at the moment, they are genuinely creepy, and I have no idea why anybody would want to
together with it.
Yeah, exactly. And the key to it actually kind of the answer of why they were so creepy, and like you said, the more realistic they try and make them, the more unsettling it becomes. And then I was watching clips. I haven't seen the whole movie yet, but I heard it's actually pretty good. But the clips from Alita Battle Angel, and I said the fact that they kind of made her, gave her those big eyes and made her a little less realistic, made it actually easier to accept her as a full CG character. Because once, it took a few moments to go, okay, the eyes look kind of weird, but I see they're going for the Japanese manga style. Shannon said it's like, well, I thought it was Snapchat the movie. So, which is a valid point too. It's like a Snapchat filter. And that, and working in a movie theater, I did see clips of cats, and that was like, I don't know why somebody didn't pump the brakes on that. In production.
The uncanny valley.
It's that was a pretty bad joke. I liked it.
It's sort of like, well, it goes back to Goldblum's line. Just because you could, you didn't think about if you should.
Yeah, I don't think I do a good
just
Goldblum.
Just because you can do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean. Well, people learn.
Just because I can do a good Marge Simpson impersonation doesn't mean I should. I don't think cats was a good idea. Okay, I shouldn't have done that. My throat is a bit too dry for that right now. You really need to have a drink of water before you go for Marge.
Right.
But so again, it's and I have to believe that audiences still enjoy some stylized stuff. I was thinking about another Halloween movie, Nightmare Before Christmas. Mm-hmm. If that movie had been done in the same style as Toy Story, it wouldn't have landed.
No.
It was the stop motion that made the movie what it was, made it so charming, and the story seemed written to that. And I talked to producers, and they kind of, the producer I work with, I've also done comic books in the past, and he says, well, why don't we turn this script into a comic book so we can, show, visually how it would work? And I go I spent, and, to his credit, he was not so gung-ho about it that he just thought it was an easy answer. He listened when I explained to him. They're two completely different mediums, and a very good script just kind of written into a comic book without any consideration of the medium, it's not going to come off as a good story. It's going to come off as a very stale comic book. That's not to say that comic books can't translate, but even the Marvel movies, they took aspects from the comics and they did their own movie version of them, and and they worked that way. So it's my hope, and the reason that I do this show, that audiences will kind of, and I do see it already, it's like they're burning out on Star Wars. I don't think they're burning out on Star Wars because they've done too many Star Wars movies. I think they're burning out on Star Wars because they've kind of lost what made Star Wars special to begin with. And a lot of franchises
started to end up being Star Wars by committee.
Yeah, well, it's like they look at it and go, I don't understand. We've got the lightsabers, we've got the spaceships, we've got the, and it's like, like committee or by algorithm, and they see that they think that the audience just wants more, use the Force, use the, and they're like, now we can do this with the Force, and now we've got spaceships that can do this, and by the way, we brought Lando back, it's like, it's like, yes, we love Lando, but the lines you wrote for him are not Lando, and I think Billy D. Williams, like when they finished with the most interesting man in the world, they should have brought Billy D. Williams in to. He would take over, right? He would have made a great replacement for that, but
that would have been a nice refresh on that.
Yeah, but they just, you're watching the movie and you're going, these are people who, I guess it's like the fan fiction thing. They don't understand why they like Star Wars. They like we all do. They love the effects. They love the ships and the locations. These ice planet, desert planet, cloud city, but they didn't understand that it wasn't just that it was that. It was that they were done in a certain way. And I guess even Lucas kind of forgot that because he went and CGI'd over a bunch of stuff. And then he didn't understand why people were angry because, it's not just nostalgia. There's a feeling to it that, comes from this hand-on approach. And I am glad that some people are still using it. But again, I don't want to be gripey about CGI because I do see some wonderful CGI as well, and it does it does work in certain places. But again, another Alec thing. I think he said when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Looks like a nail.
So
I like that they decided to go practical with Baby Yoda.
Yeah.
Right. What a charming, what a hit, what a just gone viral smash that was.
Right.
And that story just fills me with warmth that Werner Herzog said, when they came in and said, okay, now we're going to shoot it without it. And he said, you cowards.
Yeah.
They might have just been shooting a plate. Who knows? But just to have Werner Herzog on your set saying "you cowards," would be awesome.
Well, it's funny because I say that too. I actually have kind of used that term before because I've had people tell me, to my face, like, look at these Marvel movies. What hope do you have of competing against that? Disney's gonna own everything. You should just give up on this. Stop pushing practical effects. And it's the same thing. It's like you're being a coward. Eventually people are just going to burn out on everything just being CGI. It's not to say that we shouldn't use CGI, but they're just going to, it's like I said, it's like, oh, here's the CGI shot again.
Yeah.
Eventually people will go looking for those things. And like you said, like Baby Yoda, practical, like even people that don't care about effects in general, they can see the difference and they're glad they went that way. And they still use some CGI to, when he reaches up and grabs stuff or, tries to eat a frog. And that was such a charming show as well. It didn't try to be more than it was. And I'm blocking on the name of the director right now or who created it, which is a shame because I really love his work. He did Favreau, yeah. Yeah. Because at Christmas time, Elf is on 25 out of the days out of the month. But he's really brilliant, and he understood, like, this is what it needs to be. And he's using a practical it's not really a practical effects technique, but it's an on-set technique, which I think is really neat. I don't know if you've gotten to work with it yet, but it's kind of the LED screens that track with the camera movements.
Yeah.
Have you got to work with any of that stuff?
I haven't. I mean, I've heard of it, and I understand what the concept is, and I'd love to see that in action.
Yeah, I don't know. It gives me a thrill to see stuff like, and it's, again, as a director, I mean, I've done a lot of green screen work for my own movies, and it is not easy. It is not just click a button and the screen disappears. No. It's click a button and half your stuff disappears along with it, and then you have to spend days trying to get it back just right. And there's reshoots, and so the idea that you turn the camera on and it's there, and I love the clean plate thing. Like you said, you get these wonderful motorized camera gimbals that they'll repeat the move, and you can have camera moves, and you can be in the shot being a puppeteer, and you can remove mics and all that sort of thing. So that must be fun for you now that you're doing a lot of these effects. You don't have to worry about, like, where am I going to hide myself? How am I going to position this rod so it's perfectly behind this skinny little creature arm or something like that.
Exactly. And it's so funny because I've done enough of them now to know that if there's they go, well, should he wear blue or black? And I said, it doesn't matter what I wear, as long as I'm different than the thing.
Yeah.
I don't, even if and then other times, you wear a green suit and they go, oh, there's wrinkles in it. I can see shadows and some of the green parts are darker. It doesn't matter. As soon as I'm a quarter inch away from the puppet, you're going to erase all of it.
Yeah. I did a bunch of VFX work as a job where they had a green glove. I did not use a keying software on it once. I had to roto all of that, and it's not even worth it because the keying software deletes more of the shot than you would actually delete the green.
Right. It still leaves some stuff in, so you go back and rotoscope it.
Yeah, a lot of frame by frame rotoscoping, and they have AI that figures this stuff out for you, but it's like I look into that and like, oh, how much is that? Like $10,000. I'm like, I'm not even making that for this entire job, so
right.
I'll just do it the old-fashioned way. But like I said, as a director, it really is nice to shoot things in camera, and even when I was working on miniatures for my movie. There were some times where I was like, you know what? Okay, this is a tunnel. I've got this miniature tunnel. It's 4 feet long. I want it to look like it's going on forever. I could put the green screen behind it, but that's going to be a pain. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to paint like Wile E. Coyote the rest of the tunnel in perspective and just tape it to the end of the tunnel. And in the lighting and stuff, the audience will never know. And it just removes so much work from the equation, and it ends up looking better. So, anyway, went off on a little tangent. I do, speaking of just, rods and hiding stuff, I will tell you this. Okay, so 10-year-old me, when Aliens came out, and you were you must have been in your early 20s when you did Aliens, right?
Yeah, 25.
So, so someone just 15 years younger than you're scaring the crap out of. Like, I hid under my covers for almost a year. And I didn't even get to see the movie. I just saw clips of it. And then my mom came home. She's like, it's rated R. You can't see it, but I'll tell you what happened in it. But that alien queen, you guys, you had no way of removing any rods or anything like that. How long?
No, wasn't that crazy to think that there's no CG erasing anything?
Yeah, and it still is. To me, the Alien Queen. There's been subsequent. ADI did an animatronic and a beautiful puppet for Aliens versus Predator, but the shots where it's CGI, running after them,
Yeah, I know.
The Queen and Aliens. I'll just say that Aliens is one of those movies that gave me the bug. Like Planet of the Apes gave it to you. I got the bug for special effects just watching, the trick editing for the face hugger, the queen, the miniatures, all that stuff was just so insanely good. And I'm encouraged now because as an indie filmmaker, I can kind of half advocate for it and half use it as an excuse, we don't have the budget to do that CGI, but we can do it miniature just like they did back then. And that was an $18 million budget for that movie, which I still think
that's still pretty low budget even in those days.
I think I looked it up for inflation, and I think it comes now to $38 million, which
that's still cheap for what we did.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
and
no.
Cameron came from a production design background, from a doing it himself background, and knew where to use different techniques, not just rely on one thing. And so, for him to use hanging miniatures, in some scenes, was just like, that's genius. That's old school, and it works so freaking great.
And rear projection, which is what we were talking about before with the LED screens, is just an extension of that.
Yeah.
And I, to me, it begs the question, the people are dumping like, $80 million on, I just saw Underwater, which was actually pretty good. I was surprised at how good it was, but it was like the budget for that was $80 million. Yeah. And I think because Disney took over Fox, they just dumped it into January and didn't care about it at all.
Right.
But I was watching that movie going like, this begs the question, like a lot of the franchises that are like billion-dollar franchises now started out as auteur movies, like, Star Wars was 11 million, Aliens was 18 million. I wonder why aren't studios kind of falling back on lower budgets and just saying, why don't we use these more cost-effective methods and see if we can maybe generate the the next franchises for a generation? Because they're still trying to generate new franchises, but they they'll lose $250 million doing it if it fails. So
what was there was some superhero film with using the gal from Game of Thrones, and I don't even know what it was. It just came and went so fast, and then they had spent just millions and millions on it.
Oh, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I never watched Game of Thrones, so I.
Oh, okay. Really? Is that another joke?
No, I never watched Game of Thrones.
Oh my God. Okay.
Wow. And I'm ashamed to say it. As a fan of KMB, I never got into The Walking Dead either. And what's weird with The Walking Dead? I'll just say this as an aside. I think it was I spent so much time in the 80s and early 90s as a zombie kid to finally have a television show. For me, it came a bit too late.
Yeah.
And the zombies were brilliantly done, but it was a zombie show that my mom liked.
Yes.
After years of my mom considering getting therapy for me, suddenly my mom's trying to tell me to watch a zombie show. And she said something that made me kind of nope out on it. And it may be unfairly. Okay. I'm sure it's a great show because I've got plenty of friends who absolutely love it. But she said, but it's not really about the zombies. It's about the human relationships in the, and I was like, I want it to be about the zombies.
Make it about the zombies.
I don't.
I got into that show. We were into it for a few seasons, and then they started. Then they started kind of insulting the audience's intelligence a little bit.
Well, that happens a lot, yeah.
Bottle episodes and just like filler, and cliffhangers that wait, that's what you did with the cliffhanger when we came back? I come back next week and that's the result? No, come on. And that turned away a lot of people, There's still enough to make it an ongoing franchise and have its spin-offs, but that one for me, that's I had enough of that.
Yeah, it's kind of, I think and they've got another spin-off coming in movies, and I'm going like, are you guys maybe doing this a bit too late again? I don't know, but again, I have a lot of respect for Nicotero, and I haven't seen Creep Show yet. I'm really looking forward to his Creep Show. So I've heard that that's fantastic. But anyway, I think, I don't know if this is anything you want to add. I think we should probably wrap this up, but we could move on to the post show for my Patreon supporters. But
sure.
Anything else that you want to add before we go?
I guess. I talked about, working on Hocus Pocus and how that turned into a classic. Spaceballs is the same for me.
Oh, yeah.
I could probably just tell stories and stories of working on that, and it was kind of dumb and panned at the time, but it's grown into something, quite nice, and so I've yeah, I worked on that.
Hey, I want to see the Schwartz Awakens still. I thought that movie was great. Well, let's talk about Spaceballs in the post show. So entice some people to pledge to my Patreon and get the post show. So I want to say, yeah, I gotta be a bit mercenary here. Come on, y'all got bills to pay here. Anyway, but thank you so much for being on, Rick, and it's been a real pleasure. It's always, so many effects artists, they seem to be having so much fun, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why I've been attracted to practical effects all these years. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It was nice to chat.
All right, and so for my listeners, I don't know if you're listening in the morning or the evening, as usual, but whatever time you're listening, thanks for tuning in, and we're going to continue this on the post show. I'll be back with more great practical effects artists soon. So you all have a good one.